The average levels are called average because the average person is there most of the time. And in fact, to get to level 3 or higher is exceedingly rare to the point that we may never have met somebody whose center of gravity is at level 3 or above.
I want you to say that again.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah. Say it louder for the people in the back, please.
Like, say that super loud for everyone to hear. You don't know anybody above level 4.
Including yourself.
Including yourself. And that's really important to understand and face. Like, maybe, but super, super unlikely.
The big hormone enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, with 5 wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8 wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
I don't think we got real specific on the levels themselves. Like, especially what I want to hit on is the average levels and like what it signifies in terms of that kind of narcissism and how self-absorbed and self-referential everybody is. Level 5 is level of personal control, and it's the way that you kind of keep people on their toes around you. And it can be all whatever your type style is, whether it's like being combative or being argumentative or being condescending or being too sensitive.
I mean, level 5 for a 9 would be tone policing, for example.
Right. It's like I can't handle if you venture outside this box, and I'm going to make you wrong for it.
Yep.
And so there's an interpersonal control because you're not like telling people what to do necessarily. You could be like 8s could be doing that or something like that, but like it's generally how you're manipulating things. It's like,
And this is playing out with not just the type and the instincts, right?
this is playing out the whole ego structure, the whole personality system. So it can be whatever your thing is, but I thought it might be kind of interesting to talk a little bit more about some of these average levels, and also maybe we could share like examples of either ourselves or other types at these levels to share some contrast. That's why I sent everybody their types level development thing. Welcome to Low Vibrational Living Part 2 with the levels of development from your most incurious podcast, Big Hormone Enneagram. Listen to Part 1 was our last week's episode on levels of development, levels of health as they're known, and the whole concept of health in the Enneagram studies and how people use health to hide from themselves, like the concept or their understanding of it, and what it means to actually be healthy, and how the personality or the ego does not really understand what health is. And so the transition between average levels of health and the healthy levels. And today we're going to look at more specifically the average levels, what they mean, give some examples, and get into what's happening to the personality on those levels. So taking it from last time, 9 levels of health, 9 levels of development. These were uncovered by Don Riso, author of Personality Types and Wisdom Enneagram. And these are a major part of the Enneagram Institute's teachings. And they've sort of leaked into other authors and other teachers' understandings. But people generally misunderstand health to mean how good you're feeling or doing, or your attitude. And one of the main things that we talked about last time was how people tend to say, I definitely am this type that I definitely am not, because I'm a healthy version of that type. Like, I'm a healthy 4 or I'm a healthy 8. So I don't do all these things that other 4s and 8s do, or whatever type. And, people misunderstand health to mean transcending your type, when in fact, to be healthy means to see more clearly and deeply what prevents you from seeing clearly and deeply. You see your type. You don't necessarily are identified with your type, but you're freer from identification with it, but you're still seeing it, and you're seeing it very, very clearly. because a higher level of health or development means more consciousness. You're more conscious of your personality and your ego included. So
You know, the funny thing to me about the conversation about health is people sure like to bring up health in the Enneagram when it comes to their typings as just as a deflection. But when it comes to like, let's talk about health, what it means, and the process of doing inner work, everyone's silent. Like no
Yeah.
one wants to talk about it.
Big.
Like you would think that this this topic would be a popular one, but it's not. Like I know how popular. I can tell how well the episodes are doing. You know, after the first couple days, and as expected, there weren't that many people interested in health. Like anytime you start talking about inner work, people like to throw it out there to sort of throw you off the scent of what is really going on with their type. But it's like, all right, let's actually talk about health. It's like, oh no, I was just bringing that up to I'm a healthy whatever, but it's not based on any sort of intentional inner work or any interest. To be honest, it's not. They're not really interested. It's just to sort of like prevent themselves or anyone else from really seeing clearly.
Totally. Yeah, and there's some sort of like way of engaging with development itself and what that means in the process. People get really vague all of a sudden that are, very pro health until you get them to define it.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, what we did with the last podcast is that we got really fucking specific about what health in the Enneagram really means, and I find that people are more attached to the idea of health from a sort of general, vague sense of self betterment, like just personal development. Like you took some course and you feel better about yourself because you added some new psychological skills to your arsenal, or you became a nicer person or something like that, which is sort of thing that we do to pat ourselves on the back and feel good. But the prospect of health is much more daunting and much more intimidating in the sense that like we got into towards the end of the call, it's an ego death. Like you're annihilating some sense of control that we're all the personalities grasping onto, and that's not comfortable. That's challenging.
Right.
And so that's inner work, and there's nothing popular about that. That's,
Right. Well, it puts us on a person's personality on shaky ground in terms of how the personality evaluates itself. And like the majority of Enneagram discussion and understanding and learning is focused on kind of a narcissistic way of reinforcing one's sense of self and reinforcing one's identity, what one identifies with. And so that's why when you push into some of these deeper layers of the Enneagram, people get really uncomfortable and even get moralizing, and they get just all over the place in trying to somehow keep it to a place of self flattery or self fascination rather than like how you actually evaluate yourself from the point of view of the levels of development starts to undermine your ego project and your ego ideals and your instinctual ideals or goals and agendas, and it's a kind of a loss it brings you in touch with.
So today you want to get into, I guess, some of our own experiences of the average levels for
Yeah.
each of our types.
So yeah, so the levels, 9 levels of development are divided into 3 healthy levels, 3 average, and 3 unhealthy. And so the average levels are called average because the average person is there most of the time. And in fact, um, to get to level 3 or higher is exceedingly rare to the point that we may never have met somebody whose center of gravity is at level 3 or above.
I want you to say that again.
Mhm. Yeah, say it louder for the people in the back. Please.
Like say that super loud for everyone to hear. You don't know anybody above level 4.
Including yourself.
Including yourself, and that's really important to understand and face. Like maybe, but super unlikely because it requires non-identification and ego transparency and some grounded experience of being. At the healthy levels, the personality is more transparent, meaning you're not as identified with it, and that you are directly perceiving, not just thinking about or imagining or feeling it, but you're actually experiencing some kind of station of being. And that is exceptionally rare in modern human life to the point of you probably never met somebody at that level. And that's really important to understand, and that should humble us and challenge us to see what kind of efforts really are necessary to have just a momentary experience of a small kind of awakening.
I almost called I wanted to name the episode "No One Is Healthy," but I was like, maybe that's a little too dark. I've said that to people before, just from this perspective of what the Enneagram health levels are describing, that you're not at health levels. Like you're not like, just because you fixed one aspect of your personality to be less fixated on this does not make you healthy. That's not what it's describing. It's not some ego project where you're adding and you feel you can pat yourself on the back and say, I'm healthy now. Like, you're not actually healthy. And it sounds harsh and it sounds too dark, but that's the reality. There's no one, the amount of time and the work that it would take to sort of untether yourself from this personality structure to the point where you had some freedom. That's what it is. No one is healthy.
Well, it's
It-
also, to me, it's like freeing, because if this is what health feels like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, truly, like, if I'm just living my everyday life and I am healthy, then like, fuck that.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
are you saying
Boring,
that you're saying that like health by that metric is like not doesn't feel very free?
Well, like, like,
If you were identifying as healthy, is that
yeah, if I were, and people who, people who say they're healthy, they're like, oh, I'm healthy for. It's like, well, if you're healthy,
And you still
then
suck. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
you still suck. Like, and I know it's, but like, you know what I mean? Like, you still suck.
Yeah, I
they
mean,
they still haven't transformed. They haven't actually made it. Hasn't You can't see any real change.
Right. And
They're
I
just
know, like,
putting on the
health, like,
badge.
doesn't mean you have a good attitude or whatever, but like, you obviously are so out of touch with reality. Like, why is that what you're going for?
right. Yeah. So like that's a
Mhm.
good point, is that like health is something that no one else can probably see. Like it's not like, oh, suddenly they are like great people. Like you'll be able to
Hmm.
like if you're around somebody, you will tell that they are free in a way that other people are not. You'll be able to tell that they don't aren't identified with their likes and dislikes so much. So they're not just in reaction. They're not putting forward a positive or negative agenda. They're just letting things be. They're letting themselves be. So there's just a lot of being. Doesn't mean that they don't have a personality, that they're not making jokes and being combative in certain ways, but they're not hooked in the same way. It's like
Yeah.
we easily impose our ideas of what health should look like from our own limited point of view, our own assumptions of what we should be like or what other people should be like, and just get fucking rid of them in terms of what does it look like, because that's going to be an obstacle to understanding health. The picture is not the same thing as the reality of being inwardly free. And so you can be like a lot of Sufi stories about uh, saints that are basically dicks on the outside, that they're looking to be blameworthy in the eyes of all but Allah. And so they'll sometimes do shit that's like crazy or controversial or rude, and it's also important to understand like a lot of grifter type of teachers, especially like a lot of Vedic teachers and stuff that are usually white people, like often use crazy wisdom or some other term to speak to this principle where they're like free inside, but like in the marketplace, but alone inside. And like that shit is just a grift. Like it's if somebody else is healthy, it's not like they're special. And part of being healthy literally is the death of specialness.
Yeah, it can't be. Needs to be repeated over and over again. Everyone is at these average levels. Everyone. Like to
Yeah.
know someone who's at these healthy levels, it's just incredibly rare. You probably don't know anybody at that level. So
Even people that are pursuing those levels and have done so for decades are not at those levels, right? And then there's
Right.
some people that talk about, small numbers of people. I can think of like two examples of people that I think actually may have some experience at level 3, and
Mhm.
and I've been around them, and um they were only, say, into the Enneagram for like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. So it's, you know, that's another whole subject, is pursuing health, what all that means, and people having some capacity to actually be healthy, or to trick themselves, find new ways to trick themselves into imagining they're healthy and not being healthy or whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like, again, it's health is a death of your personality or your identification with your personality. So it's a death of ego. And so that means all the things that you value, all the things you're holding on to, all the things and ways that you think you should be and the world should be and other people should be, that goes too. So it's like all the grasping and holding on and narcissism and whatever, it's like it's a radical impartiality that can feel cold or threatening, or like things should matter more from the healthy point of view or something like that. Like there's this thing of like the radical impartial quality is scary to the personality because it is a kind of death of personality, and it's
Hmm.
like not, it's impartial whether things go well or bad.
Yep.
And it's not like, oh, once I'm healthy, then I'll be donating to all the food banks and be volunteering or whatever. It's like it's free, and it's free of even those kind of super ego impulses or messages or values. It's free of a lot of what we would a lot of our personal virtues. There's a whole other thing called the virtues, which is a whole other topic that we'll get to sometime. So level 4. Let's talk about level 4 for a bit because that's probably where most people are at. Level 4, level 5, sometimes level 6, but level 4, it's like a flexible personality. And what I mean by that is that the lower you go in the levels, the more rigid, or by contrast, like diffuse the personality becomes. But usually, I think rigid is a catch-all, the thing that works. It's like the boundaries of who and what you can be become more limited the lower you go in the health levels, and that means that the structure of the psyche becomes more constricted, becomes more limited, and who and what you are becomes more limited. And so, for the level 4, this is like a pretty functional, pretty flexible personality where you can tolerate certain kinds of pressure, stress, triggering, and your personality doesn't collapse. You don't resort into either outright like rage or whatever. Like you don't resort into despair or anger or blame super quick. You can take some pressure. So people who are at level 4 generally great, great to be around, great to get along with. The best people are probably level 4. It is called the level of imbalance, according to recent Hudson, because there is an imbalance. There is an identification with the personality over essence, and it's also called imbalance slash social role because each type has a kind of a role they play for other people. Whether it's like 8, I'm the strong one, or 4, I'm the deep one. 5, I'm the one who knows or sees. 6, it's the one who's alert and seeing things. Whatever. This is where we're really identified with the quality that our type is based on.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of politicians kind of hover around that level 4
I'd
area.
argue that they're probably between level 5 and 6, 7 sometimes. like because like that. I think of that. What's that like phrase or that idiom that like politics is show business for ugly people,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
like the amount of narcissism and the amount of I mean look at how fucking dumb politicians are and how
Yeah, it's
how corrupt and whatever. I'd say it's probably level 6 is like your average politician, Democrat or Republican. Like
Yeah, so it could be like, because I'm an old guy, and it's like they're from another era, where you at least put like these days, actually, in a way there's more room to be unhealthy in a way, right?
mm-hmm.
Whereas it used to be that you had to be squeaky clean and sort of unflappable, and have a generally, what would you call it, circumspect kind of attitude where you could handle opposition, being in your field, and have some capacity for compromise, and just all of those kinds of qualities. It had this sort of upright citizen kind of energy to it. But yeah, it's certainly different these days.
Now they
Yeah.
just yell at each other.
But even like, you can yell at somebody and still be healthy or whatever, like
True.
it's a lot of these things are like not how the personality normally measures them. But I'd say that like if you are needing to like, I don't know, represent some kind of ideological agenda, and you're willing to spend your life and career like that's an agenda that is especially like that, self-benefiting.
Yep.
And about asserting your own personal value over other people. You're probably level 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So it's like you can be squeaky clean. Like, some types are prone to get more squeaky clean as they get unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was gonna ask John if because the Riso Hudson levels of development for each of these types talks about level 4 for type 4, and I don't know if you actually resonate with what it's saying about level 4 for type 4.
So I'm looking at Enneagram Institute's website right now, .com/type-4. Take an artistic, romantic orientation to life, creating beautiful aesthetic environment to cultivate and prolong personal feelings, heighten reality through fantasy, passionate feeling, and the imagination. I think it's on the right track. I would kind of modify it a little bit because this is still describing something very behavioral.
Yeah.
What I think it's getting at for the 4 is that it's identified with the emotional center. It's amplifying the emotional center agenda through thought and through reinforcing thought. And that will extend to, the indulging in fantasy, and fantasy like even in a fairly subtle way. Like it's not like, oh, I'm fantasizing about being like Anna Karenina or whatever that Tolstoy or Dostoevsky novel or whatever is. It's like I'm not necessarily having a whole fantasy life I'm engaged in, but like I'm re-engaging thoughts that amplify my frustration, that amplify my rejection, that I'm amplifying my sense of being not in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because when I read it, it doesn't really. I'm not really seeing the differentiating aspect of 4
Right.
at these levels.
That's a really good point. Like at level 4, 4, A4 is doing a lot of differentiating, like a lot, and it's not necessarily super neurotic. It's not debilitating. It's not like they're unable to function. I mean, 4s are never really able to function, but they're not like unable to live in the world because they're differentiating. They're still differentiating, but it's not like so against the world that they can't exist in like like nobody's gonna say that the 4 is like, nobody that knows the 4 and doesn't have judgments about the 4 is gonna say that the 4 is like mentally unhealthy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what are we doing? Are we going to look at level 4 for all our different types?
Well, yeah, we can. Yeah.
Or just keep going, look at level 5 and level 6 and then go circle back around.
I mean, we could cover that for all our types. Like, I mean, we start with like, before we go, David and Nancy, do you have anything to add there or want to look at or anything?
Or on type 4 or on our type at level 4?
Yeah, anything.
Let's see. I'm just looking. So I'm reading 9 level 4. I'll just read it and see what spills out here. Fear conflicts, so become self-effacing and accommodating, idealizing others and going along with their wishes, saying yes to things they do not really want to do, fall into conventional roles and expectations, use philosophies and stock sayings to deflect to others. What would I say about all of that?
That sounds like a regular, normal, I guess, normal 9.
Yeah.
What 9 do we know that doesn't do that?
How would you define conflict here? Because I think a lot of people who misidentify as other types that are 9s, like that always jumps out as like, when I'm talking with a 9, they're like, well, I don't fear conflict, like, but I don't think
Yep.
conflict means like a battle with somebody.
So yeah, I mean, partly with 9s, it's compartmentalization of conflict. Like, and what I mean by that is unconsciously you've got let's say a superego rule book about where you can do conflict and actually where you should do conflict. Like, I should speak up about this in this area, even if it is going to cause disagreement or whatever. But it's got the sense of wanting to come to, I guess, some kind of holistic and healing place, as opposed to just kind of like type 8, just fuck off and you're gone, you're dead to me, right? Or whatever.
I've never heard those words come out of Emika's mouth. I really
I never say that. That's not.
Yeah.
That's not a me at all.
Right. So, but you know what I mean? There's this quality
Totally.
with 9s where, and it's like 9s, like we've talked about it before, where there's a lot of 9s that are into super competitive sports and they rise to the very, very top. And it's like the sense of, I'm allowed to be aggressive and extremely competitive inside this square of the playing field, right?
Mhm.
And so that's my outlet for all of that repressed rage and repressed disagreement in a lot of, because there is, a sort of quality of wanting to harmonize with the people and the vibe in your environment, right? And so and you're kind of morphing yourself in different ways internally, probably in ways that aren't true to yourself, right? And you're finding ways to kind of integrate things and sort of wrap around things. It's kind of, water like, right, where you
That-
can take on the shape of things.
That's a really, really good and clear point, like, to describe level 4 for any type where you're morphing in some way. Like, 9 will morph to accommodate something or to adapt, but like you're not simply being. You're not simply being what you are. And so
Mhm.
like if we get to when we get to 8, it's like 8 is morphing to be more forceful than might actually be of their essence, right? Like essence is not something that has function, but you're putting a lot of energy into the functioning part of your being, which is your personality. So like for the 8, it might be forcing, right? Or for 4, it's separating. It's whatever's going on, but there's a there's a sense of non-being there. It's not impartial. So that's a really good point, no matter what type you are.
The last sentence on this level 4 description for type 9: use philosophies and stock sayings to deflect others. Well, in my 20s, my longtime music partner, who's a 4, he's a sexual self-pres 4 with 5, he used to call me Aesop because he was making fun of me always doing, philosopher of the universe stuff. So, because I do, I he would ask me a question, and this is classic philosopher of the universe. He'd ask me something personal, and I would go into a thing about some kind of macro philosophical thing, and he just wanted to know what happened, what was going on for me personally, and I started talking about everything except me, right?
What's Aesop?
Aesop is there's a philosopher called or like a set of they call them fables, Aesop's fables, and it's like lessons on life, and it's probably like the guy is probably a 9, one of those deals.
That's funny.
Anyway, yeah,
A reference from the 20s.
Yeah,
Exactly.
from the 1920s.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about 3 or 8?
So I just want to verify for everyone out there, it's very easy when reading these to be like, oh yeah, I'm a higher level than I am. Like, I'm
Totally.
sitting here and I can hear my inner thoughts going, oh yeah, you totally are type like level 2 or 3, Nancy. And I'm like, no, come on. So
Right.
just for everyone listening,
I can tell you're not,
it happens. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
So fuck you. The level 4 for 3 is highly concerned with performance, doing their job well, constantly driving self to achieve goals as if self-worth depends on it. That's completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
Terrified of failure, compare self with others in search for status and success, become careerists, social climbers, invested in exclusivity and being the best. Yup. That's 3. I don't know what else to say about that. That's pretty much
Tell
just
us.
how I exist in life. I
Level
don't
4 sounds
experience-
functional. It sounds like
It's super
Well,
functional.
it's because 3s are functional.
yeah.
I mean, and I don't really experience the exclusivity as much anymore. I did when I was younger, though. That was
There's-
a big thing.
What about like setting yourself apart from?
Oh no, I do that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think some of the language here, like, and I said this in the last episode, and still might be controversial, but I think that this was like a brilliant insight on Don's part, and I've wondered if Don, or at least some of those who teach Don's material, don't fully understand the implication or what it's really saying,
Mhm.
and so sometimes, yeah, like I think that, and I mean, my fucking whatever chief obstacle of arrogance, but I'm like, I think I really know the real thing. So who knows? Maybe all this is full of shit, but I do think that,
Don't be too certain now.
don't be. We're very curious here.
You're very curious.
I couldn't resist. It was great.
But what I think is important to like some of the clues that we can have that this is deep on the level that I'm speaking to, is the shock point between healthy and average. Like that means something.
Mhm.
And so when you get to level 4, you're talking about somebody that is functional, that's just normal. And like some of these things can sound negative, especially when we're applying them to ourselves. But this is basically what we're doing anyway. Like we're all on this, that we're all self-interested, that we're all avoiding certain fears. We're all trying to pursue certain things to stave off certain kinds of deficiencies. That's like just totally normal, even if you're wonderful in all other kinds of ways. What the personality is doing is, in a sense, a reaction to something negative.
Mhm.
And so there's no being there. And so what you start getting when you read like Don or whoever's interpretation of the levels at level 3, something is shifted. And what could shift, like if you're just like to make this system anew, what would be a shift from a level 4 point of view to a level 3 that would cause this kind of change? And it's not just like you get happier or you get your goals met. Like how would these apply to ego structures? At average levels, the way that we face disappointment is predictable, because it's usually the way we face disappointment is some kind of collapse or rigidity or retraction or pushing or blame. Level 3, something else is there, so that when the personality is disappointed or the personality fails, your whole sense of self is not failing. And that, I think, comes through even in like these, whatever we're looking at on these very brief summaries on the website. That sense that there's something else there that can withstand the disappointments, failures, overwhelm, whatever that can still remain, is clear. And the only thing that could be is being. So that's what that shift must mean. And so then when you get to level 4, what you're looking at is the way that the centers start to compensate for that lack of being by getting involved with each other, and the passion getting activated and being the motivating force, the personality, and the passion being reaction to the instinct. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's get a little specific here. Looking at the description for level 3, it doesn't sound that different.
For
know,
level 3 or
For
or
type
level
3,
4?
like your type, let's look
Yeah.
at the level
Type
3
3
and
level.
3. Yeah. And
Yeah,
look
it
at
doesn't.
it doesn't sound like a big, we're talking about this shock point between 4 and 3. I'm not seeing that reflected in what's being said here. So can we talk
Well-
about level 3 and like what
Yeah.
that would
And
look
it
like?
might just be an issue of the description, the words.
Yeah, I think so. My issue with this level 3 is it's still very doing.
Yep.
I don't know. It just doesn't seem to fit.
It doesn't seem
So
drastic enough.
Yeah.
yeah, yes. Well, again, I think here, like, so on level 4, highly concerned with performance, doing their job well. There's a real sense of anxiety around self that I
Mhm.
get. Terrified of failure, anxiety around self,
And how you're seen.
and how you're seen. Whereas level 3 here, as ambitious to improve themselves to be the best they can be, often become outstanding, a human ideal, embodying widely admired cultural qualities, highly effective. Others are motivated to be like them in some positive way. Like, I hear totally what you're saying because it just sounds like the positive
The
flip side
best
of
3.
what's at level 4.
Right.
Yeah.
It just seems like a 4, or excuse me, a type 3 that is doing 3-ness well.
Yeah, exactly. A very successful 3.
And but what I think that it's trying to describe, or what it's coming from, is a place of where 3 has like an inherent sense of value, the essential quality of value.
Yeah.
And then they're functioning just from that sense of value. And so not necessarily like they're killing it at work or whatever, but there is not the same way that they're drawing on outer circumstances to provide that sense of value.
Yeah, that's it right there. To me, a big piece of it. I mean, that's why I brought up being seen, because if you read level 3 with the idea that it's not about being seen as these things, it's
Mhm.
about actually out of your own sense of your own value from yourself, right?
Right.
That's why you're improving, as opposed to where it was so much before at level 4 and downward about the picture for everybody else.
The picture to stave off the sense of deficiency and emptiness. Whereas like level 3 is still, the personality is still really active. It's still the dominating force, but there's some being there. There's some like being that's not lost when you just like forget, you get a text and then you forget yourself. There's something still with the personality, even if it is dim or it's not very strong. It's still ongoingly there. And what I mean by that is like, if you were to like sense your hand, like as a listener now, and then try to continue to sense your right hand until the end of this podcast, you couldn't do it. I can't do it. We can't do it, right? But if we could, there might be, we could say that there is something there that, and it's not like we're like sensing a hand, it's like there's just something there that can be with sensation for that long. That kind of a thing, that there's something there other than the personalities, ADD or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that, there's something else there. So you're still functioning, you're still doing your thing, but there's something that can, for the 3 in this case, have recognize, experience, and be value that's not just conditional on their performance. Which level 4 is like, I need to perform well, otherwise I'm not going to get the juice.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe the description isn't the best, but I think maybe the name for that level, the level of social value, describes it a little bit
Mhm.
better
Right.
versus like the level of social role, because the role has more external investment, in versus just social value, which feels a little bit more intrinsic.
And I'll also say that we can have glimpses. Like if we're at level 4, we can have glimpses, and often glimpses of level 3. Like even though that's a
Mhm.
shock point, the reason it is a shock is because it is so hard to actually bridge it versus we can tap into it. So like we've all had level 3 experiences. Like we've all had
Yeah.
these moments of being like, yeah, like I just feel my value or whatever it might be. So but also, as I said in the last call, like if we're really obsessed with where we're at, we're probably at level 5. Like
Yeah,
we're like,
that's a
where am I? Where am
personality
I?
thing.
Yeah, totally.
All right. 8.
Let's do 8.
Level 4, it says self sufficiency, financial independence, and having enough resources are important concerns. Become enterprising, pragmatic, rugged individualists, wheeler dealers, risk taking, hardworking, denying own emotional needs. Yeah, that sounds like typical 8 stuff. Um, the self sufficiency seems to be a bullseye for any 8, like not necessarily financial independence, but just independence as a worldview. Risk taking, I don't know about necessarily hardworking. I don't know if 8s are hardworking, they're just pushy. in terms of I'm going to get what I need from the environment, and not just for me, but my own group of people. What my I can relate to, looking at the sense of our own group, what our own group needs, making sure that we get more of the stuff that we need, and other people can't affect us or stop us from getting what we need, which is an extension, I guess, of myself. Like, I'm part of something, and if I can expand our own capacity to get the things that we need, that's helpful to me also. Um, so yeah, there's that sense of a plus minus thing going on versus me and the environment at this level, where everything that I come in contact with has the capacity to either add something to me or take something away from me. And I'm here to make sure that I get more that I'm taken from.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it, Emika, with likes. It's like what I talk about with likes and dislikes. Everything's a plus or a minus, and
Yeah.
and like it's more overt plus or minus with an 8, because there's that sense of um, expansion, and there's like there's a being in the world kind of quality to 8. Like a
Mhm.
4 or a 5 might not think of things in terms of gain and loss the same way.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's like that plus and minus thing where I'm going after what I want and avoiding what I don't want, and organizing my whole like being is around likes and dislikes. That's totally level 4.
Hmm. And from a sexual aid perspective, there's a sense that there's the resource of interestingness and
Mm-hmm.
juiciness, and people representing supplies of that interestingness and juiciness, and I just want to continuously expand the capacity that, or access to that, and I want to push away from those who are diminishing
Yes.
that interestingness,
Yes.
and then want to corral it. I mean, what basically happens every year is, like, I feel like we're collecting more and more interesting people, and we're pushing less interesting people away. So that's from my sexual aid perspective. That's what's happening.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that description has it's kind of two things at once. The level 4 description that Don did there has kind of a self-pres sort of accent to it, but at the
Exactly.
same but at the same time, there's a quality about 8 that has a kind of self-pres attitude in terms of, you know, even people are resources, for example.
Yes. Yeah. I relate to that strongly, and it for a long time. I think part of the reason I had a hard time with 8 descriptions is I think that self-pres sort of bear qualities. It's
Yeah.
hard to relate to as a sexual 8, but it's definitely a thing with me with the attraction instinct, is that I'm brutal in terms of my disgust at people's capacity to generate interestingness. And I don't realize I'm doing this, but it is. I have a real problem with, what are you bringing to the table in terms of how much interestingness can you contribute to generating, and if you can't do that, then I'm like, you don't exist.
Yeah, it's a bit intimidating.
And it's fast as fuck. Like how
It
like, you're still like I think you'll give somebody like a certain amount of time and spotlight and attention. Like, yo, are you interesting? And then you realize no, they're not, and you're just done with them.
Bye.
100%. It's like you couldn't supply the goods, and now it's like, I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed.
Some
Instantly
forfeits coming in
disappointed
there.
too.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I think level 3, it says, I have a hard time with the distinctions between level 3 and 4, but here it says decisive, authoritative, commanding, the natural leader others look up to, take initiative, make things happen, champion people, provider, protective, and honorable, and carrying others with their strength. So I guess that um, there's a little bit less of the plus and minus thing going on there, where you're just embodying expansion and strength without the need for the environment to give and take, I guess.
Or the projection that everybody's trying to grab resources.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you
Right.
can just be I guess,
Yeah.
a representation of strength instead of making it happen quite as much.
Exactly. And Yeah, and you're just being and experiencing the strength, and it's not like so or one of the things that's coming up is like any eight or any leader or whatever will probably like if they're at level 6, they'll probably be like, yeah, I'm at level 3 because it's like it would justify their authority or
Taking.
power or yeah, they're whatever they're holding court, whatever they're doing and however they're doing it in their lives. Like that's one of the reasons it's really you have to have a lot of nuance to apply and read and study the levels because what kind of like an 8 or somebody like an 8 that's got a sort of something authoritative about them would not want to be like, yeah, I'm just decisive, authoritative, and commanding. I'm a natural leader others look up to. I take initiative and I make things happen. I champion people. I provide, I protect. I'm proactive and honorable. I carry others with my strength. Like what leader, even the most psychopathic, doesn't think that? That's how they justify their taking up the space they take up.
Mhm.
And so if you're taking it from this behavioral external point of view or which one am I point of view, you're going to think you're higher than you are.
Yeah, and I think watching myself that there's a when it comes to sexual that there's a way that I'm trying to make the juicy, interesting chemistry happen, and trying to like hedge it. And sometimes I recognize that I can't control that. I definitely can to some degree, but there I can let it happen. I can facilitate certain things, but then I can just not be so invested in the plus and minus of that kind of stuff, and just not control as much. And so yeah, I don't think I'm at level 3. I'm not, but there have been moments where I felt like I was a little bit more loose around my investment in the outcome of whether interesting shit was happening or not.
Mhm.
Not in New York though. I was definitely upset about that day that we all collapsed and did nothing.
We weren't interesting.
No, I was big mad.
Yeah, that was hilarious. So I guess since we did all of our types, we can look at level 5 and like the transition there because I mean, I don't know, we can read them all or not, but like structurally, you've got somebody that at level 4 that is needing to kind of assert their personality's agenda, right? It's level 4 is the level of social role. And don't take that as like social instinct. Don't take that too literally. But it's like, you're playing a role to yourself and to others. You're being your type, you're being your personality. For 8, like I'm the rugged individualist, risk taker, hard worker, or whatever, pushing things kind of person. I'm a big energy. For 4, it's like I'm being, introspective and deep and whatever.
9, I'm everybody's philosopher or
Right.
psychologist or counselor, listener. Yeah.
Right. 3, I'm the effective doer. And so all of those, however, are motivated by some kind of fear, right? Like 8
Yeah.
and 9 is motivated at that level to be those things because there's a certain way that they're trying to maintain their ego boundaries. That's the main agenda. It's mixed in with the essential harmony and essential strength that's at the core of those types. It's like through that lens, maintaining how do I maintain ego boundaries while somehow being related to essential strength or essential harmony, and then you get level 4. But at level 5, and then with 3 and 4, like how do I maintain my essential identity of essential depth or essential value at the same time as like keeping a certain sort of focus on my sense of identity. Like how do I prop my identity up to myself? How do I convince myself that my identity is real? So those things start to collapse a bit to get to level 5, where at this point you're not convinced about your identity if you're an image type, or at level 5 you're for a body type 8, 9, for example. You're feeling like your boundaries are getting pressed on in a way that's uncomfortable, so you're overcompensating. And so at this level, at level 5, most of the time at level 5, we are very narcissistic. We are very self centered and self absorbed, and we think we're not.
Yeah.
the defense here is seeing how is against seeing that stuff and all those compensations for not having the thing that our type wants, not having the I guess in the language of Reese and Hudson, like not having the basic desire fulfilled, and so there's like a fear comes in, and so level 5, there's a lot of denial. This is where we're like really blaming people. If we recognize that we're always kind of like agitated at somebody or something, or finding a new person to like blame or fight with or feel a victim in relation to, like we're probably at level 5. We're really not free here. We're like hung up on stuff with we got some kind of crusade or whatever, some kind of like thing that really needs to happen. It's like we're really trying to be our essential quality, but from a really distorted point of view. We're really trying to like if 4 at level 5 is like really trying to be the like hyper focused on my individuality identity, and it ends up being like very self-absorbed, very moody, totally preoccupied with every mood, every nuance of mood that comes up, and hateful and separating big time. It's like being separate from the environment to the point of uh not being able to function freely and feeling really sorry for myself and feeling hateful towards X, Y, or Z person.
Yeah, for me, for 8, it's a threat of being contaminated with too much lame energy. And I just get really violent about trying to just eliminate that from from having any influence over me, and just like trying to create distance and separation from whatever I think is just like anti-interesting, anti-creative, anti-juicy or whatever. And when I notice my personality really getting reactive, it's around that kind of stuff. That's what triggers me, is like being exposed to people that might bring too much of that bullshit around me.
Well, yeah, as a sexual 8, it's like that sense of strength can also be understood or experienced as like aliveness or vitality or something. And so combined with this sexual interestingness, it's like this is not vital. This is not like oof, this is not giving me that fucking feeling or whatever. And it's like
Right.
it's deadening, it's like a fucking calcified dead weight that they're preventing.
Everything is judged on like how much voltage it's damping.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you go. And it's like if there's too much of a, I start to feel overwhelmed by lack of voltage, and it literally feels like I'm dying. And I start it feels like I'm dying, and it feels like I've got to fight my way out of being overexposed to this. I can't have my environment be overwhelmed by this energy. So like if you guys see me acting up, that's why.
Wow, that sounds exhausting. Like for you, like I like my level 5 way better than yours.
What's your level 5?
That's level 5 for me is definitely where I hang out when I'm like working and like excuse me, and like doing school, and when I'm busiest or going for a goal, I'm at level 5 100%, because that's when I get really image conscious, and it says begin to package themselves according to the expectations of others and what they need to do to be successful, pragmatic, efficient, premeditated, losing touch with their feelings. That's where I live 100%.
The sense of rigidity, like not just one-ish rigidity, but like your limitedness of self is like really apparent at level 5, where you cannot get outside a certain repertoire of feelings, thoughts, reactions, actions. Like you're really a cartoon of yourself, and you feel though like you're not. You feel like you could get out of it if only so and so wasn't such an asshole, or such and such wasn't happening,
or if I wasn't so busy.
There's always an excuse, because we're defending against like what we really know on that level, which is how fucking empty we are.
Yeah, and the last sentence is something I run into like within my personal relationships a lot, which is problems with intimacy, credibility, and phoniness. And that's, I'll say, like I'll become friends with random people, and like a week or two later I'm like, I don't even fucking like you. Like I get
Mhm.
really frustrated with that, and I'll like
Mhm.
make plans with people that I don't want to
Hmm.
do, and I'll say yes to things that I'm like, why did I say yes to that? Like,
That's
Right.
interesting.
yeah, and I've now gotten Brian to be my like person where like if I say yes to something, he's always like, "Hey, are you sure? Are you sure that you want to do that?" Because I'll just get so into it where I just say yes to things that would never want to do.
I've seen
But
that being a real struggle with attachment types.
Yeah, it's so annoying. It's so
do,
annoying.
do you even like us, Nancy?
Yeah,
Oh,
Nancy, do
that's
you?
questionable.
Yeah.
I'm in too deep at this point. The facade is just making me No, I like you guys. You guys are fine.
Kind of. Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
All right.
I'm looking at level 5 for 9. That looks like total home base, really.
Yeah.
Active but disengaged, unreflective, and inattentive, do not want to be affected, so become unresponsive and complacent, walking away from problems and sweeping them under the rug. Thinking becomes hazy and ruminative, mostly comforting fantasies as they begin to tune out reality, becoming oblivious. Emotionally indolent, unwillingness to exert self or to focus on problems, indifference. Um, so one thing, I mean, besides, you know, a lot of that's just self-explanatory, but there's a way in which nines, and this is why there's a lot of mistyping with nines. That level right there is, a lot of nines that are, I'm just going to give some random kind of examples, like a lot of nines that are into, say, heavy metal music, like really loud, wild shit or whatever, or debating intellectual ideas or whatever online or whatever is, I mean, that's and getting into heated arguments sometimes, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot that's actually, I mean, that level 5 that I just read, it sounds like totally passive, but there's a way in which you can just do a lot of distractions that have a lot of sort of energy to them, and it's a way to be disconnected from yourself and to be
Mhm.
indifferent to yourself. It's you're decoupling from yourself and your own, life force and so forth, and kind of getting distracted in these sort of, thing. I mean, like a lot of nines that are into sports and stuff. Again, there's because something that's sort of, I guess what I'm getting at is something that's sort of unsaid in that description is, it's still a body type, right? And so you can do kind of a lot of automatics, right? You're like,
Mhm.
you're just, there's all these different automatic trains that you can get on, that have a certain momentum and motion to them, but they're all kind of like leading away from you.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna ask about the first sentence, which is active, disengaged, unreflective, and inattentive, because a lot of philosophers of the universe see themselves as being very thoughtful and attentive and reflective. Like, so how would you parse that out?
Well, one thing is, um, the philosopher of the universe 9 has their own agenda about how they're kind of remaking, re-envisioning the world, right? And since it is, a sort of harmonious, sort of big vision, metaphorical philosophy, it's in the clothing of, being engaged and attentive, let's say, right?
Mhm.
Because it has that general sort of spiritual accent to it, right? um but it's but you actually, like the gut types kind of all have one thing about them is they all kind of have a certainty, even the nines, right? It's kind of like it's a certainty in your body about how things should be, or how everything is, or
Mhm.
something, right? And one thing you're getting, if you're deep in the personality of being certain about how things are, that actually is a kind of disengagement,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You're not being present to what actually is. You're doing your exerting your own agenda onto existence.
So one of my favorite 9 tactics is to there's like a way of doing the opposite of what they say they're doing. So like
Mm,
in the guise of some kind of positive value. So like we encounter all the time where like online if we're making type distinctions or something like that, and then a 9 will come in and being like, well, how do you really know anything? You're not really being curious because you're uh,
yep.
you're saying you're saying this and with certainty, but that's not really curiosity. And like but that's what the 9 is doing in that case is not curiosity. It's just making things vague under the guise of a positive value, and it's a way to maintain boundaries. So like, don't go there.
Yeah, that's actually like it's a really, really sneaky way to be aggressive in a way,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's why you call it, of course, passive aggressive, but you know what I mean? But it's like really insisting, no, reality is this, or you should be this way.
And
right.
weirdly enough, like I feel like that is what like Republicans do.
Mhm.
Like or people who are I don't know, like I've just heard that kind of argument of like, well, if you're saying that those people are dumb and those people are hateful, like aren't you just as bad as them because you're hating on them too? And it's like flipping the script. I don't know if that
Yeah.
made any
Yeah,
sense.
I think it's
No,
a
yeah.
universal
Yeah.
tactic, but I think that 9s are
Or
most prone to it and to not see that they're doing it
Mhm.
because it feels like, "Oh, I'm just being open. I'm just being whatever. I'm just being
Yeah.
good. I'm just being whatever." And it's like certainty and curiosity are not opposites. They're it's like you need certain bases of understanding to make other kinds of leaps of understanding, and if those leaps don't check out or they're flimsy, then you go back to your assumption and re-correct it or change it to what actually corresponds better with reality or whatever.
It's like science.
Yeah.
It
Everything is true until proven otherwise, but it
it
doesn't mean it's not true just because you might be able to prove it otherwise someday.
it feels like the that perspective is saying that curiosity and openness is not making distinctions because
Right.
distinctions are limiting, and so
Yeah.
limiting the field then supposedly means that you're not curious and open. um, but it's like you can make distinctions and still be curious. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive,
Right.
you know.
So yeah, I see a lot of 9, like, so in this level 5 description, it's like I am very reflective, and it's like the 9 wants to believe they're reflective, and so to see how unreflective the 9 is how they're going to grow. That's what the levels are useful for, is to be like, whoa, this thing that I've taken to be reflectiveness is actually a false or
Yeah.
facsimile. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yeah, facsimile of the real thing. And so that's like where all of us are at level 5, is like, I'm not being fucking deep and creative and introspective at level 5. I'm rehashing shit that pushes my buttons to
Mhm.
like be in this churning, upset, smoldering place. It's like it's a false replacement for the real essential quality. And this the level 5, you're still like okay enough to be around. A lot of people are here. Most people are here really, and at this level though, there's like a lot of subtle manipulation. So like at this level, if you are with somebody who is at level 5, they're subtly trying to control you and they don't even realize they're doing it, because like you can't talk about certain topics or breach certain things or take certain actions that are going to put that person outside of the small island of identity that they feel safe in. And so through the style of whatever type, they're going to find ways to put you, like, make sure that things don't go beyond the confines of what part of their identity they feel comfortable expressing and being. And so like you get I can't tell you how many fucking people that think they're real fucking awake are here,
Mhm.
and they use certain kinds of like positivity or pretending to be intellectually rigorous, whatever, to just control other people. And it's like you can feel this. You can feel this if you're like really listening to yourself. Sometimes you're like, oh, but maybe they know more than me. Maybe they do. Fuck them. Like you can feel when somebody's level 5.
Yeah, and because the perception of what health means aligns with positive type perspectives, some positive types would who think that they're doing the work will say that I've made these certain changes and in my life and I don't do this anymore. But now because I've made these self-development changes that I'm more positive, that I'm at a higher level of health. And it's still an investment in this positive goodness personality project, which probably means there's still a level 4 or 5. Like, nothing really has changed. It's just the packaging.
Yep.
So, we won't go into level 6 too much, but it's right before we collapse into full-on mental illness at level 7 and 8 and 9. The reason those levels are unhealthy is because we are mentally ill. The psychological structure cannot handle the pressures on its boundaries. It cannot handle certain states of overwhelm. It can't handle reality. Your sense of reality is collapsing. You're still functional, like your personality still functions okay, but you really live at arm's length from everything because everything is like a potential threat to your ego's agenda. And so this is where you're sort of in argument with reality, like overtly. You're aggressive in the style of your type. So like it might not look like overt aggression, but you're like pressing against reality. You're fighting, or you're in denial. You're whatever. You're completely dysfunctional, whatever it is. But it's like you cannot accept reality as it is by any means. And so some like example I used when we were talking about this idea earlier, somebody that is enraged at the help desk at an airport because the flight is already taken off and they're demanding that the plane returns. It's like not going to happen. You can be mad for a lot of fucking reasons, but like the idea that the plane is just going to come back. This is a dumb example, but you get what I'm saying. It's like this sense of like rage of how reality is operating basically without your consent, that it goes on. And so everybody at this level is like highly, highly fragile personalities. And depending on their type, they can look like an 8 or a 3 or a 7. They can look really aggressive and assertive and not fragile, but the psychological structure itself is very fragile. Whereas like 9s and 4s and 5s and some 6s are going to look very fragile in this place. So anything to add to that?
No. Is there any more stuff we want to do on this?
I think this hits it, unless we have like want to talk like what real health means. But I think we did a good job of that last time.
Yeah, we covered that last time. Yeah, this was good in terms of just looking at the average levels, because I think a lot of people were curious, a little bit more curious as to how this stuff would look. So
yeah, I think this is like really good that we did this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, guys.
All right. Talk
Bye.
to you.
Bye.
I do find it hard to realize my true potential, and without the right credentials, I am lost. Don't take it for granted, or your life it will be slanted, and the chances you are left with are